Welcome to the first episode of the Oddities and Anomalies podcast. I'm your host, Kruger, and with me is always Garth. Dan.
Hey, hey, Wayne. I mean Kruger.
How's it
So,
going?
and I hope I'm not speaking over you or speaking out of turn, but when this channel was developed, my understanding was we were going to discuss issues that are of the unsolved nature, of the profound nature, and things that some people just don't have the stomach for fear of superstition, uh, not wanting to get noticed by Big Brother or things of that nature. And I love that concept. I love the idea of probing the unknown, and I think that you're the perfect guy to do that with.
Oh, and you're 100% right there. This podcast was designed to, explore, the not so popular ways of thinking and not so popular topics, things that people get called crazy for either believing in or even just entertaining the thought.
Exactly, and coming to that and bringing that full circle, you had done before on other channels, you had paranormal podcasts where you talk about incidents such as that, like um, interacting with spectral phenomenon, and like I said, things of that nature. But I didn't, when you brought this discussion, this what's the word I'm thinking of, idea to the table. I love how you expounded on that, saying, I don't want to just talk about the paranormal and the supernatural. I want to talk about the unsolved, the questions that people in all over the world have asked about things, and then usually just get quiet for fear of exposure. And
Or,
I guess that brings us to where we're at now.
or persecution,
Exactly. And I guess, like I said, that brings us to where we're at now. And as you've so abruptly titled this Kennedy's Last Ride, and seeing as John F. Kennedy's files have been released for the umpteenth time, I guess what better time to talk about it than now?
Well, here's what I find interesting is we had selected this topic just for, those of you that are paying attention. This was last week's topic, but real life got in the way. Other things, came and went, and so we weren't able to actually get this first episode of the podcast out last week. But this we had decided on touching on this subject before President Trump decided he was going to throw out there that he was gonna let the paperwork go, even though it was supposed to go anyway.
But he had to have credit for it.
Well, I felt like he very much like beat us to the punch, even though I'm sure he really wasn't trying to compete with us directly.
Oh, well, maybe he was. Big Brother is always watching, Kruger.
1984.
Wiretaps, baby. Wiretaps everywhere.
But I thought the timing of that was absolutely hilarious.
Well, I
And
mean,
another reason why we decided on this topic because we decided on it what 2-3 weeks ago.
yeah, we got into a little bit of a tiff over it. Like you believe one thing, I believe another, and that's another thing that I'm going to enjoy about this. We don't always agree, but we're not children about it. We'll have an educated, democratic discussion where some people will start flinging dung like the savages that they are. We can get to a point where we can agree to disagree, and for people to watch that, I think that might provoke some civil discussion, some real fucking discussion, rather than I hate you, I'm going to attack you and fuck you and blah blah blah.
Well, I'd like to hope that you do have sufficient ducking skills because I'm not above flinging the poo.
And I'm not above doing this podcast on the toilet, so so I guess just as long as I can dodge it and land in the bowl, we'll be good to go.
You would not be the first person to live stream with me from a damn toilet.
I'm aware, and that was a subtle little crack at that.
And so I guess we ought to actually get into the meat of it. So of course, I did not put it in the tags, and I I hinted at it in the title, and that's because of YouTube's the way they've been knocking things down with titles and tags and such. There's nothing that has to do with the assassination in the title or in the tags. Just I kind of loosely curved it around that. Not that this is monetized, for any gain or what forever. This is just merely a means to explore some thought. And so this will take us back to November of 1963.
Before you go to that, I wanna bring up John Fitzgerald Kennedy, as we we had trouble finding his middle name, but before that fateful day in Dallas, Texas, which I'm from that area. I live in Texas. I live in North Texas, and I don't get me wrong. There's not a year that goes by that speaking as we're coming around to the anniversary again, but not a year goes by that's not brought up, and how a lot of people in Texas had a problem with John F. Kennedy. They were not happy with him, and that trip that he came on was basically a goodwill mission on his part. In fact, Jackie O, who had again tragically had another miscarriage, came on him with him on this trip because she had a bad feeling, and she's gone on record of saying it. But it leads me to think, what were the circumstances that led up to that? I mean, clearly we're going to get into the Lee Harvey Oswald involvement, but I kind of feel like there's something there we can touch on, something before the actual incident to build up to
Well,
that.
there were a lot of things that were like building up around Kennedy's presidency. I mean, well, you have, which I'll only touch on now unless we want to get into it deeper later, is all the Lincoln parallels.
Oh yeah, but there's definitely that.
This was just coming off the Bay of Pigs incident with the Soviets
Hmm.
and the Cubans.
Hmm.
Vietnam was just starting to be kicked up. This was before that false flag Gulf of Tonkin incident, which if Kennedy had lived, that false flag operation may have never happened.
Well, I mean, I think that he was the beacon of peace when a lot of people wanted war, and I think that type of mentality was something that a lot of people didn't want, and I think you can agree with this. War means money, and hell, case in point. Well, let's fast travel to the 2000s to the Operation Freedom, and look at Dick Cheney and what I can't remember his company. What was it? Something. What company did Dick Cheney own that ended up getting a lot of government contracts?
Um, I know who the Bushes were involved in, which was the Carlyle Group.
And not, it wasn't just that; it was Dick Cheney's actual company. It was
Wasn't Halliburton, was it?
there you go. That's what I'm talking about. Halliburton. Halliburton got so many contracts after that, and like I said, Dick Cheney is an older man. He was smart enough to know I have a puppet, and I love W. Don't get me wrong. I got no beef with W. And I'm not trying to like again. I'll bring it back to Kennedy, but but the example I'm trying to set here is the precedent I'm setting here is war equals money. Halliburton gained money hand over fist over the Iraq War. Going back to John F. Kennedy, Kennedy being in power was no puppet, and so those who wanted this war, those who wanted that struggle to keep going, knew that they had a lot to gain with the exit of President Kennedy. And I think that could have very well had a lot to do with his eventual
Including the
outcome.
Vice President, Lyndon Johnson.
Very much so. And you notice how not a lot of they don't a lot of people don't talk about him, Lyndon Johnson. They try to keep his name kind of on the down low because why would you want to be known for that? Because once his name comes up, then the wheels start turning, and you have people like you and myself who say, "Did you have something to do with this?"
Well, it was no big secret that neither one of them really wanted Johnson as Kennedy's running mate in the first place.
No,
And
no,
it seems just if you do your research, the two of them really didn't like each other too much. But
nope.
where
And
Kennedy went down is was Lyndon Johnson territory.
mhm. And the thing is, Lyndon Johnson was a means to an end for him. It helped him. It elevated him to look better in the public eye. Like, okay, yes, you're John F. Kennedy, you're XYZ, but it's okay because we have Lyndon Johnson, and maybe that he'll be the voice of reason. I think that's what a lot of voters were thinking. A lot of the voters that were on the fence when it came to him, and so, yeah, like I said before, and like I
In
agree with you.
all honesty, Kennedy had another unpopular opinion was he was, and had his support of the civil rights movement at the time as well.
Exactly. He was a very big supporter of Martin Luther King and things of that nature. And, you have I'm being from the South. I've grown up around this type of mentality. It's never died. It's still, hatred breeds roots that grow far and deep. But for a president in that day and age, in that time, to be openly supportive of that movement was not very popular in the South. And again, there's so many avenues you could go. And to assassinate him, uh, you had so many different ways to look at it. If going towards, like I said, Lee Harvey Oswald, it was so clean that there were so many different ways they could have gone with this conspiracy, and no one may ever know the truth.
Well, and that's the thing is, and this is, part of what we argued about was the whole Oswald Avenue of things. If you take it at face value, the book suppository building, the multiple shots, the one shooter, it doesn't all add up. And if you look into
And again, this
Oswald's
is
history, that doesn't add up either. I mean, he was like working with the Soviets, but then yet he was not.
and apparently his aim was not all that great when he was in the military, but then it was that one time he had to qualify. So, and you're right, and that's where I have to. You also had the we had the argument about you thought that there was multiple shooters, but I've watched field tests, field studies, and documentaries, and I'm not saying that they're all right. And again, this could be manipulation on behalf of somebody else who's controlling that, but it was shown on this documentary that the magic bullet theory is definitely a possibility. If the bullet, because it showed the caliber he was using.
Oh, don't get me going this early.
Here we go. Here we go. The bullet, as they showed the photos of Kennedy, and they showed the photos of I can't remember who was in the front seat. I can't remember who it was, but the gentleman who was in.
I'm
Huh?
just going to throw this out here right now. If
Go
you
ahead.
believe that thing is true, then that bullet had to have been blessed by the gods.
But hear me out. Hear me out. The wound that the gentleman in the passenger seat that was hit, it
You're talking about
coincides. Yes. What was his name again?
Connolly.
Yes, Connolly was hit with. It matched up with a bullet that hit Kennedy in the back of the head, came through, his back, hit a bone. And you're not going to stop it. I mean, the trajectory is still going because it's still going forward motion.
So what did this bullet like create the whole disco movement or what? I mean,
Well, I understand. I was very much on the same side as you. I thought that's bullshit. There had to be multiple shooters. There's too much of a conspiracy here. That's bullshit. You wanted Kennedy out of the way, and I agree that there are plenty of people that wanted Kennedy out of the way, and that being him being the shooter, maybe he didn't. His job was to kill Kennedy. Connolly was just collateral damage. He accomplished what he was meant to do. But what I'm saying is the idea of multiple shooters. Okay, I get where you're coming from. But the bullet and the ballistics done on that bullet, even to this day, because they've redone it and retold it, if the
but
bullet traveled as it did, and it came out of his body and nicked a bone, which it did because he had bone fragments in the ballistics report and the medical report, and came out sideways, that would have caused the larger exit wound.
there's too many entry and exit wounds for me to want to believe that stroke of nonsense. I mean, you also got to realize that anytime a bullet strikes something, it decreases in speed. It doesn't gain it.
And that's true. That is true. But the type of rifle he was shooting, and it was shooting at a downward motion, instead of decreasing, it would have increased it because of the downward shot. Now, I would agree with you 100%. Had he been shooting at a straight line target, had he been shooting upward at a target, but no, he was shooting from that upper floor in the book suppository downward at the motorcade. And because of that downward momentum, that would cause the bullet to gain momentum and rather than lose it, even when it struck
So
Kennedy.
it goes through the back of a man's fucking head and his neck, comes out, comes in another dude's fucking shoulder, bounces around to his wrist, and shoots back up his wrist, up over his shoulder, and then fucking strikes the guy. It's way too.
It did no. It didn't come back. The way the trajectory went from what I saw
Look
from
at
the
the
head.
president. How he went forward and he went backward. It's a telltale sign of being hit by multiple positions.
I don't think that's the case. I think that was him in shock. I think he jerked his head. I don't think he died from that shot. Immediately, of course. I think he died, but I think he turned
Obviously,
his head.
because he raised his hands up around his neck.
Exactly. But I think there was multiple shots, but I still think it came from the same
But
gun.
that was an entry wound. If you look at the autopsy photos, that's an entry wound, not an exit wound.
You mean the back of the head, or are you talking about
What went through his throat, which occurred before the back of the head went goodbye.
well, I think that first shot was successful and I think that could have very well been right through because he hit him once and then again behind the back of the head. Because it came to the side and the back of his head exploded.
Since we're talking about the back of the head,
Okay.
let me just throw this one on you real quick. I don't know, how well versed you are with this theory, but it's one that's come out in recent years. Of did the guy in the car behind them accidentally let off a live round and nail him in the back of the head?
I don't agree with that, and here's why. Here's why. Your Secret Service agent. Are we talking about a Secret Service agent, or are we talking about a?
I'm talking about
Okay.
Secret Service agent.
In that day and age, a Secret Service agent was known to carry a revolver, not a 45, not a snub nose,
They were
but
carrying automatic weapons
okay. So
that day.
that okay. Well, that establishes this even more. If he's carrying an automatic weapon of that caliber, then the caliber of bullet would have left some sort of ballistic casing in the back of that car. You can say it may have rolled out of the car, but that would have been noticed.
Well,
And if
here's the thing when because you're talking about the car, so I'm gonna have to throw this at you real quick.
okay,
All right, the car that Kennedy was in before it was released for investigation, it was tore down and restored.
Mhm.
Before anybody got their chance to even look at the thing, it had already been stripped down, cleaned up, everything else.
Well, then that leaves plausible deniability. That leaves doubt. That leaves doubt that somebody may have been involved, and that therefore makes it a possibility that yes, there was multiple gunmen if someone was trying to cover it up. But
And
then that goes into the realm that the government itself was responsible in some aspect for this assassination. But I'm open to that possibility. But if I'm open to that possibility, you have to be open to the possibility that maybe not the first shot. Maybe there was more than one gunman, but you have to be open to the possibility that that shot that Oswald shot may very well have done that damage to Connolly.
I'm not saying that Oswald was not involved and he was not a shooter.
No, he is positively the shooter. That's the thing we don't
I'm just,
we can agree on. He was a shooter involved, and I can agree with that. There's no denying that because he was the man with the gun. The bullets matched the ballistics perfectly. But what I'm saying is, and I'm not disagreeing that there's a possibility of multiple shooters. There is always that possibility. What I'm saying is the magic bullet is the magic bullet in this case. I'm not saying that every bullet that Oswald shot were ones that killed Kennedy, but I am saying that the bullet that went through Connolly's back is the same bullet that made that large indention, that large gaping hole in his wrist.
I'll give you that, but I'm not going to say that's the same bullet that blew out the back of President Kennedy's head.
I can say that's a possibility, but as I've been doing the research for this particular episode, I have to admit I am starting to get a little bit fishy because yes, like we discussed earlier, I think enough material, and I hate to use a man's flesh and a man's brains as and call it just material, but a material interfered with the trajectory of that bullet that it had to have slowed down at some point. But that would explain why they would find the bullet by the shoe of Connolly in the passenger side. But there again, there's a lot of ifs with that, you know. Um,
Well, if you've got multiple shooters, you could have multiple caliber weapons, and you're catching one bullet. Is that the one that they missed when they were cleaning up the car and it was found? So they were like, "Oh well, we got to pin it on this."
and that's very well true. But going back to let's go to the conspiracy angle here. Who else does it benefit? Who else does it benefit that this man died?
Well, Kennedy's death, it definitely benefited a lot of people. I mean, we even at one point, when we were talking privately, we discussed, the fact that his family had mafia connections, and back in the '60s and '50s and beyond, the mafia had plenty of government connections, but apparently, as president, he wasn't, being subservient to those connections. So could that be something? It could be.
And I think we disagreed on this. I think that perhaps the mafia was desiring to do something about that. I think the mafia may very well have, because let's not be fools here. Let's not be childish. The mafia exists. There is very much a mafia.
It's
There's
not
a,
what it was, back in the early '60s per se.
or even the '80s with the casinos in Vegas. Not even close. Not anymore.
No, it's not quite what it is. And from the research I've done, the mafia is what was known in on the East Coast as the Italian mafia has relocated most of their stuff back to like Sicily and things like that.
Until they can gain more power and come back and become a stronger force, because they've had a couple FBI agents infiltrate them, and they can't trust them. And it's a long story, but that's a whole other subject for another episode. But
Absolutely.
I don't believe that they. I do. Okay, we talked about his brother Bobby.
Yeah, who also was assassinated under very strange terms.
I think that he was the hit of the mafia, and that's again another. Well, I'm talking about him because I truly believe this. I think that he was a hit done by these underworld figures, um, due to the fact that they couldn't get his brother,
Well, how
and
about
they
the
would be
the,
dead.
the wild, I was pre-programmed super soldier guy.
Oh, don't get me started on that. I think that was a ruse. I think that was someone said. I think that was a smokescreen. I think that's almost cartoonish, if you
I mean,
will.
in all reality, there's a lot of shady shit when it comes to the name Kennedy altogether. I mean, that other Kennedy, Teddy Kennedy, he's the one that had
Yeah,
that Chappaquiddick incident that he never got indicted for.
yeah. But
Another one of the brothers.
I think he knew better, and he knew how to keep his mouth shut, and he knew how to. I think he had seen what had happened to the others, and he was like, you know what? I'm not going to let that happen to me.
I'm just gonna kill a bitch.
Yeah, but he knew how to keep his mouth shut, and he knew how to do what he was told. He wasn't as outspoken as his brothers.
And that's why he didn't get as far as his brothers. I mean, in all reality, when Robert Kennedy was assassinated, he was going for the highest office that his brother already had held.
And I think that the reason why I go back to the mafia being involved in that is they had one Kennedy. They were not going to take a chance with another one. But I do not think going back, and if we have to make a choice on who we believe was responsible, I will go back to again. I'll take it back to Johnson, because who had the most to gain? You have a
No,
man in John who
the
you have a man in
man
Johnson.
did not even let Air Force One get off the ground without himself getting sworn in as president.
Exactly. This man had everything to gain. He gained the presidency of the United States, making him the most powerful man in America,
He
if not
started
the
one of
world.
the most unpopular wars of the 20th century.
Exactly, going to do something that they had no business doing. You and I talked about it. It wasn't about tactics. It wasn't about strategy. It was about numbers. And what war do you know that X amount of people have died and we still lost?
And that's it. 58,000 casualties I'm going at rough estimate here, 58,000 as to opposed to 2 million of the North Vietnamese, plus Viet Cong and that such. But yet we get coined as we lost the war. It doesn't make a whole hell of a lot of sense, does it?
Well, I think it's because we didn't gain what we set out to gain, and like I said, it was a clusterfuck to begin with. It was something that that President Kennedy didn't want us to go into. I think another thing that pissed a lot of people off was from again research, in writings and in doc and interviews with him. Fidel Castro respected Kennedy.
Well, because Kennedy wouldn't back down from him. I mean,
Exactly. He said that. Well, I'll bring it. I'll bring it to here now. We have our Russian president. We have Russian President Vladimir Putin. We have American
it was Khrushchev.
Yeah, but now we have American President Donald Trump, and Putin has gone on record as saying, "I respect Donald Trump, and I will have conversation with Donald Trump because he's a man with pride and, for lack of a better term, balls." You may not like Donald. You may not like him, and that's fine. It's not about a popularity contest. But you have two powerful men who see each other as equals and are willing to talk to one another rather than fucking have a pissing contest. Rewind back to John F. Kennedy and Fidel Castro. And Fidel Castro was very, and again, I can only go through like things I've read and interviews I've researched and things of that nature, but Fidel Castro has gone on record, in my belief, to say, I respected President Kennedy because though we may have different beliefs, we are very similar in our pride and love for our countries.
Well, that's
and as leaders of men, you have to respect another man who's willing to do what both of these men have done for their countries.
Well, that's the thing with the whole Bay of Pigs incident. Kennedy was standing up against the whole communist regime. I mean, that was one of the things, growing up in the Cold War, that was one of the scary things. Now, it was before, my time and your time.
Of course.
But, a lot of guys that were growing up then, they remember being very scared, air raid sirens started going again, because that could easily become that nuclear war that everybody was afraid of.
Of course. I mean, remember, I've seen the old school tapes of hide under your desk and use your books to protect your head and try to, like that was going to do anything. But back then, that was peace of mind because that's what they thought. Every time they heard a siren, a tornado siren, anything, oh, this is the big one. They're coming for us.
And this was a scope of the political world when President Kennedy took office and when he reigned in office.
And that's the thing. He went out there as only John F. Kennedy could. And I mean, love him or hate him, Barack Obama had the same type of charisma whenever he spoke. He's no John F. Kennedy by any means, but as an example to anybody listening that's never done the research and learned about John F. Kennedy, Barack Obama gets compared to John F. Kennedy quite a bit because John F. Kennedy had a swagger, if I could say, that most people didn't. He was a good-looking man who spoke from the heart, and he spoke as a young man should, coming up in America, trying to do what he felt was right for his country because he was proud of his own country. And it wasn't so much his actions, it was the way he carried himself and his demeanor that diffused a lot of these negative situations.
Well,
and why so many other...
You have to remember, though, that President Kennedy was regarded as a war hero after his missions in World War II with
Agreed.
P-9.
Agreed, and that I'm not taking any away from anything of that. I that is very much. He was also respected for that. I agree, but what I'm saying is, wash all that away. I'm not denying that those things happen, but you watch a speech by John F. Kennedy. Watch a speech of his, and I guarantee you, if you have one patriotic bone in your body, you will be inspired. And that is
the man definitely had a way of talking to people.
That's what I'm saying, and that's
what I think he was killed.
Exactly.
He was
That's
too
what I would.
persuasive of the mass.
That's
And
what I was getting
the
to,
right people didn't like that shit.
and what I'm saying is like, look, being, you know what field I work in, and for those of you who are new to this and don't know, I work private security for a Texas-based organization that let's just say we they own their own their own field when it comes to this. And one of the things I've learned in the 10 plus years that I've been doing this type of work is your demeanor and your approach are everything. How you talk to somebody will dictate whether you're going to be in a fisticuffs type situation or whether you're going to be in a chair holding somebody and letting them cry on your shoulder.
Well, in all reality, you did not find a as charismatic president since Kennedy until Reagan came along 20
Oh,
years.
but see, but we could say that, and Reagan had balls. And that's the thing. And again, we're moving to that the Reagan part of this, but Reagan was one of the first, and I believe John F. Kennedy was. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe John F. Kennedy had done the same thing. Reagan was one of the first before or after John to basically tell the media and reporters, "Shut the fuck up. You really think that he had any right to do this? Go fuck yourself." He wasn't afraid to tell people what for. Very similar to John F. Kennedy. And it's those charismatic people that are the ones that change the face
Well,
of politics.
there was a assassination attempt on President Reagan as well.
And it was and a lot of people say, "Oh, it was because it was that guy who he heard a song or he read To Kill a Moth." Anyway, you know, he
That
had
dude got
yeah.
right up on him. I mean, Kennedy got nailed from a distance, and he is the reason nowadays why you will not see a president riding a convertible again.
No,
And
because they won't take that
what
chance.
from what the research I'd done, it wasn't exactly a common thing for its day either.
But the thing was, I think that he John F. Kennedy wanted to be a man of the people, even though that's why I said going back to the very beginning of this when we were first talking about it. And like I said, being from Texas, it's something we talk about on a yearly basis. His mission and him coming to North Texas at that time was him trying to establish a bridge, trying to build unity with those people in the South who were not fond of him. Texas has always been a very red state. You know it, I know it. It's just part of what it is. It's turning more into a purple state now, but for the majority of my life and for the majority of its time in the Union, Texas has always been a very heavy red state, and especially back then. And I think with him riding in that convertible, it was a message from him to say, "Hey, I'm your president. I'm open. I'm honest. I'm here to see you. I'm waving to you all. How are you?" You know, and it was probably one of the mistakes that ended his life.
That's the thing. Since since you are local to that area of the world,
Yeah,
have you ever actually walked the area?
I have. I did once, and it gave me chills
And
because
could you
it's
see?
not huge. It's not even that big of an area. That's the thing. And a lot of the buildings, some of the buildings still stand.
Mhm.
And walking by it, it's just walking, because there's still little X's where on certain areas where like where he was shot, and there's it's in the streets. And I remember standing by that and thinking to myself, this is where a leader of men was killed. This is where a man of the people. This is where a decent man, selfishly lost his life.
Yeah, because he didn't sit out of that. He never set foot out of that car alive. He didn't leave that car alive.
No.
I mean that when you're watching the Zapruder film and you see the back of his head come out, and apparently one of the Secret Service guys trying to scoop up brains and
Yep. You see that on tape. You also see them.
matter back behind the thing. And the one dude, he went diving for fucking Jackie, thinking she was next.
Yeah, and you see her trying to crawl the car. They think that she's trying to help him. No, and I'm not trying to like knock Jackie O at all. But you see Mrs. Onassis jumping out of the back of that car because she's trying to get out. She just watched her husband get killed, and she's struggling to get out. It's
Because
a terrifying situation.
she started diving across the trunk the other way
Exactly.
as a Secret Service agent is diving into the car. She's trying to dive back out of it.
Yeah. I mean, if I don't know if you watched the Kevin Costner film JFK,
Yeah, numerous times.
the back and to the left scene, and they're talking about a Mr. Clay, and they're talking about the potential potential assassination, but the
Huge
potential
problem with that.
conspiracy.
Here's the problem with that movie and it's been confirmed years ago. After the movie actually came out, because that was an
Yeah.
Oliver Stone film, and people tend to regard his films, kind of like Kubrick's old shit.
Yeah.
But um, they try to portray it very much as like word for word and verbatim,
Yes.
and it's not exactly how any of that went
Well,
down.
because you have to understand, cinema is going to do what it can to manipulate the situation. But what I was getting at with that is
And sensationalize it.
exactly what I was getting at is this is one of those things that there's always been a conspiracy theory about. It will never from my your you know from my parents to their parents to their parents to my children's children, there's always going to be a question about the assassination of John F. Kennedy. There's never going to be a time where we'll never get the full story and we'll never get the answers.
And we'll
But
never get the full government documents because the government knows exactly what happened, but they're not. I mean, they were hidden till it seemed like everybody from that era was dying off, which tells me there was more there than meets the eye.
exactly.
Two,
I'm not going to lie. I know that
nobody's gonna say Lyndon Johnson did it. Nobody's gonna say Richard Nixon did it. They're not gonna do that.
no, no. But what I was going to get at with that is like Lee Harvey Oswald. Lee Harvey Oswald, and I think you and I both agree with this, was simply the fall guy. I think that his family was compensated for him to take. I think he figured he'd spend some jail time. I don't think he ever thought that he was going to be taken out as well.
Yeah, but Jack Ruby took care of his ass, and he's
Uh,
another guy that had mafia connections.
and
Now
Jack
that
Ruby,
the only mafia connection to it all
did
is
he though? I mean, think about it. Think about
mafia.
it. Did he have mafia connections? Because let's put it this put it, it's a little too convenient that Jack Ruby was the one who killed him, though. Think about that.
Well,
The
the
mafia
fact
is
that
very clean.
he went and did it himself, and Jack Ruby spent his years in jail saying he could never talk about it,
Exactly.
or else they would hurt people that he cared about.
So who's the biggest gang in the world today in the
It's
United States?
government.
Let's be honest. Exactly. So I'm sorry, but Jack Ruby may have had mafia ties, but you're not going to tell me that he wasn't paid or he wasn't taken care of when it came to
Oh, you know this.
oh yeah, like mafia. Most mafia folks, and I'm not trying to sensationalize it with the movies. Their stuff is clean,
And I'm
and
sure
another stuff.
people like Officer Tippett, they got paid off. I'm sure there was a lot of payoffs going on.
Oh, agreed.
They
But
were using smaller organizations to take out a fucking government end.
well, I mean, you've heard of money laundering. This is no more. This is nothing more than information laundering. This is people laundering. This is basically going from one point to another so fast that you didn't have a chance to catch your breath, and therefore you did not have a chance to um, find out where it stopped.
Oh, and that's the thing. People back in the '60s were so less informed. There was no internet. All they had was, word of mouth or newsreels in the theaters. Maybe a little. Those that could afford TVs might be able to catch the nightly news. And for the regular person that really couldn't afford, extremities, they had the 25-cent paper to look forward to get
Well,
that.
not only that. Think about this. Think about the fear dynamic that they had back then. Oh dear God, don't you talk about this shit
Cold
because if
War.
you talk about it, then you're going to become a target.
But I mean, my personal opinion on Oswald, I think Oswald had been recruited by the CIA, and that's why he was doing the things with the Soviets and moving back and forth. And I think he was like kind of like a weak link in the CIA, and they figured, well,
Two birds, one stone.
he's got a little bit too much info on him, and it's time to get rid of him anyway because we can't really do anything else with him.
Well, like I said, I don't think he thought he was going to die. I think that he thought he was going to do a job, then he was going to be put
And
into a
he's going to
WITSEC
sit in
program.
jail selling his wife and kids to be taken care of, as
Exactly.
well as his mother.
But you never hear them complaining. You've never heard about them complaining.
Oh, his mother's complained.
Well, you know what I mean, like financially.
Oh no, they don't seem to have money problems.
That's funny for a man who barely worked as a bookkeeper.
Yeah, what kind of job is that? But and here's another thing is, how did he get that rifle in there without anyone noticing?
Well, see, here's the thing.
He had to pass the lunchroom to get up there.
The thing is this though. The gentleman that gave him a ride to work that day said he was carrying a bag, and it was the same bag he carried multiple times.
What,
And
yeah.
that bag was it was like a duffel bag.
But why would you be carrying something like that to work when it's got nothing but just a rifle in it? And why the hell wouldn't you ask questions? Of course, this is the early '60s.
Yeah, but you don't have back then. Back then was a time when you could leave your door open at night.
And and the Beatles would play on the radio, and everything was happy, hunky dory, and everyone loved each other.
Well, things changed after that day.
Well, you think that the even the young people of the United States had changed after that. The hippie movement was only a few years away, and their whole movement was based on anti-government
Because
they hated Johnson and his war fucking climate.
and the thing is, I think that they were the children of Kennedy. I think the hippie movement was the I think in a way that was Kennedy's final slap in the face to Johnson. You did this. And me being a God-fearing man, I mean, not everybody is that, but I think that, and the world has a funny way of telling you to go fuck yourself when you've done wrong.
Well, here's the funny part is the man that ran against Kennedy originally was Nixon, and Nixon lost to Kennedy.
Yes.
Now, after Johnson's term was up, who won next but Nixon? And then Watergate happens, and he's out. Then you got Gerald Ford, who's he's like some kind of pig farmer looking fucker. And then after that you get the pig farmer, Jimmy Carter. And shit, I don't see any accolades on their merit list that really makes me want to applaud them and be like, oh, you were a great president.
No. But I also think that America, when they voted for Nixon, they were voting for the past. I think that a lot of them were voting, and I mean, I could be wrong. I wasn't alive back then, but I think it very much could have been like, well, he knew Kennedy. He ran against Kennedy. You know what? Maybe. I think a lot of people, like, still to this day, wish that we had that. I think that's a lot of the reason why people voted for Obama is because the comparisons to Kennedy. I think America itself is still looking for another John F. Kennedy.
And what they thought the American public at the time thought they found in John F. Kennedy was a rebirth of President Abraham Lincoln.
Yes. Do you want to get into that?
We can.
I think we could. I think we should. That was a beautiful segue. I think we should. The fact that Kennedy was shot in a theater and his assailant ran to, I think, well, it was like a Daniel Book Suppository.
Actually,
and how
Lincoln that got shot in a theater.
That's what I meant. That's what I meant. And his assailant ran off to the opposite, and it was a Harvey who ran off to a theater. It's just his secretary being named Kennedy when he was Lincoln, and then you have President. Oh yeah, Kennedy. Kennedy's secretary was Lincoln, and Lincoln's secretary was Kennedy. It's strange. There's like 25 different correlating things with both of their deaths, which has to make you think. Was it planned?
Well,
Coincidence?
there are a lot of conspiracy theories on the Lincoln assassination. Now, I'm not going to touch on that too much because that's a whole show right there.
Yeah.
I actually plan on going and visiting Ford's Theater here in the near future.
It's just, you have these two great men, these two um, something just got brought to my attention. Have you heard of the curse of the Tippecanoe?
What the hell is that?
It's called Curse of. I don't know. Someone just sent me a message about it because someone that's watching. I'm
Is
gonna look.
watching?
Yeah, they're watching us right now.
Who the hell's watching this?
A mutual friend.
Nice of you to fucking tell me now. Expose yourself, mutual friend. I don't know who the fuck you are.
I'm looking it up right now. Hold on 1 second, so we can shed some light on this.
I mean, one of the last things I was reading about when it came to just while you're reading that, I'll just throw this out here about the Lincoln assassination.
Oh, I
One of the
heard it.
things that really kind of throws me off is, of course, there's, many different stories on what happened to Oswald. There's the mainstream story, and then there's a few others. And one that got me was that Oswald got beyond a bridge using a password that was given by a fucking higher ranking officer to the man guarding said bridge on that night in Maryland. And I just thought that was rather
Well,
hypocritical and fascinating at the same time.
the curse itself that she was talking of, the curse that every president elected in a year ending with zero would die in office. That's
Bush
rather that's rather interesting now that she brings that up.
Bush didn't.
I know. It ended with Reagan. He didn't die after being shot.
No, but when it comes to Reagan, for those of you that don't know, he may have had two terms, but he only had his mind from about three-quarters of the way through the first one.
Yeah, you could.
He
I
was
would love for you to
basically used
expound
as
on that.
a puppet, and they had his wife up there playing his puppet strings because the president was having a hard time with dementia and Alzheimer's. And he was becoming very forgetful. He was not the congressman he'd been before, nor the president of the Screen Actors Guild he'd been before. He just he got old.
And that happens. I mean, or then we could also go back to how do you say this? Was it that, or was it that he was systematically toned down?
Or did he get like hit by a Camino and saber dart and it like drugged his brain?
Okay, here are the 13. Here's 13 of the coincidences I was talking about with the Kennedy and Lincoln thing. You ready?
All right, go ahead, list them.
Lincoln was elected to Congress in 1846. Okay.
All right.
Kennedy was elected to Congress in 1946. Lincoln was elected president in 1860. Kennedy was elected in 1960. Lincoln's wife lost a child while living in the White House, as did Kennedy. Lincoln was directly concerned with civil rights, as you brought up before, as was Kennedy. Lincoln had a secretary named Kennedy who told him not to go to the theater. Kennedy had a secretary named Lincoln who told him not to go to Dallas. Lincoln was shot in the back of the head in the presence of his wife. Kennedy was shot in the back of the head during in the presence of his wife. Lincoln shot in the Ford Theater. Kennedy shot in a Lincoln made by Ford. Lincoln was shot on a Friday, as was Kennedy. The assassin, John Wilkes Booth, was known by three names, compromised of 15 letters. as was the assassin who killed John F. Kennedy. Booth shot Lincoln in a theater and fled to a warehouse. Oswald shot Kennedy and fled to a theater, which is the one I brought up before. Booth was killed before being brought to trial, as was Oswald. There were theories that Booth was part of a greater conspiracy, again, as was Oswald. Are you ready for this one, though?
Shoot, go for it.
Lincoln's successor was Andrew Johnson, born 1808. Kennedy's successor was Lyndon Johnson, born 1908.
See, a century apart, and so many similarities, so many coincidences.
Well, part of me always has felt that the government itself, how do I put this, has been just one big story. And sometimes they go back to the beginning.
But it also makes you wonder, and I'm going to throw this out here, the shameless plug is an oddity or an anomaly?
I think you might be a little bit of both. And once again, man, like we'll never truly get the answers we're looking for ever. I mean, these are things that, unless you're speaking to St. Peter himself, again, God-fearing man over here, or, the big man upstairs, you'll never get the answers. And why? Because, son, it's above our pay grade.
That's it. Only the rich know what the rich do.
The world is like the world itself is just one mystery. It is a mystery inside of an anomaly, inside of a puzzle box. And I think that's kind of what makes it a little more interesting.
And in this case, this was, one of the, I wouldn't say greatest heroes of our time, but one of the potential greatest leaders of our time.
I think he may have been the one who could have opened the doors and opened the eyes of a lot of people, not just American, but worldwide. And I think that he had the ability to do that. I think, as we've discussed this and going down this, I think that my eyes have been opened a little more now that I think about it to how, I always thought that Kennedy was a great man, but just talking with you in this last almost hour or so has kind of made me reestablished, if you will, a respect that I had for the man from years ago. That's just it's more than just tragedy. It's more than just a somber thing to talk about. It really is just disheartening that someone like that would suffer the wrath of, may it be fate, may it be conspiracy, but
May it be
just
money
very, yeah, the wrath of that, and
and the power hunger of other money made men.
who knows, if if history is doomed to repeat itself, who will be the next Lincoln? Who will be the next Kennedy? In 100 years, will it be our ancestors having the same conversation on some sort of digital platform to say,
When you
well,
mean descendants,
yes, did I say, what did I say? What did I say?
the ancestors.
My bad. But our descendants. Thank you for correcting me. To say that, to speak the same conversation, and hell, who's to say that if you believe in past lives as I do, who's to say that you and I haven't had the same conversation about President Lincoln many years ago? Maybe not in the same platform, but sitting in a room having a beer, talking about it.
In a fucking log cabin somewhere halfway across the country.
Who's to say? The world and the time.
Judge.
What's that?
It's not for me to point the finger and judge, but it's our duty to ask questions.
And I mean, I don't know how much longer you want to go with this, but what I will say is it's up to you to figure out if it's an oddity or an anomaly.
Oh, and that's exactly it. And honestly, before I don't want to pat myself on the back too much, but this actually came across a hell of a lot better than I had expected because I'd done all my research last week and I was like, oh great, I forgot it all by now. Because it was last week when I was ready to go, I had it up right on the tip of my tongue. I was just ready to like spew facts, 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 facts.
Yeah,
For being behind on everything, this actually hasn't come off too damn bad.
I agree. But I think what it comes down to is, and I think people have pointed this out to you and I, and not to toot yours or my own horn, but you and I have a chemistry that most people don't. We are halfway across the country from each other, but for some reason, since day one, you and I have always had that feng shui, I guess, if you will, that mm, that style that just kind of clicked, like just like a clock and gears, we just kind of roll together. And you and I know how to have those civilized conversations that others don't. And I think this is no different than anything else we've done. It's only that now we have a platform to do it, and we have topics that we can truly scratch our minds with.
Oh, and that's the thing. One of the greatest things I learned in life is to question everything. But the
Absolutely.
greatest question you could ever ask about anything is why.
I was just
Not
about to say that.
not who, not how, is why. Because when you understand why, then you start understanding all the secrets of the universe.
And that's when you get to expand your mind, you know? I think that, I mean, you can tell me if I'm wrong here, but I think we're coming to a very good place to stop this because I think this is meshed very well, with you, if you agree or not. But would you like to let anybody know what we would plan on discussing on our next endeavor into the oddities and anomalies of the world?
Absolutely. This actually hasn't been that half bad of an episode. I was actually really worried about it coming off like crap, but come this week, hopefully at the normal time we start getting this scheduled, we're going to dive into the land of urban legends and one urban legend in particular. A furry, something about a furry man with some ram horns, and depending on where you're
Hey,
coming from, the legends differ.
and let's say this, he carries a hatchet. He is known to slay the innocent, and he is one to not take too many prisoners, but trophies instead.
And since you want to let the cat out the bag, just to let you guys know that might hear this in the future, and the few of you that are watching now, at our regularly scheduled time, hopefully, as long as nothing else comes up, we'll be discussing the Goat Man, the
The
different
goat man.
goes the Goat Man.
Because there is a northeastern goat man and there is a southern goat man, and there are similarities. There are quite the similarities, but there are so many differences. And I would love. I can't wait for that one. I've already created a thumbnail for it. I'm very happy to dive into the lore of the goat man.
We're not exactly here to prove his existence or whatnot, but to prove that it's a possibility, absolutely. To
And for
prove
you,
that,
and I guess if you don't mind, I'll close it out to if it's okay with you.
what the hell was I going to say first? Oh, I don't know. Anyway, you might learn something you ain't never heard before, and urban legends are just absolute fun for the mind.
And
Now
that
I'm going to turn it over to you.
Well, that being said, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this premiere episode. And I pose one question to you, for you to take into thought. When you find something you don't understand, when the world has become mysterious and cryptic, think about this. Is it an anomaly or is it an oddity? We'll catch you on the next one.
And we'll keep looking, and we'll find you out there.